All right. Hello, everyone. Georgi from DigiBurn here, the world's first 100% self help mobile for burnout, for the next episode of Burnout Triumphants. With me today, I am having an amazing guest out of the UK, Shona Hirons, who has to tell us a story of a professional sports person, an achiever, an escaped lawyer, and so much more. Actually, she experienced not one but two different, two separate burnout episodes, and has a lot to share. Has learned in the process on the way of ultimately becoming the best version of herself, and devoting her nowadays to helping and enabling, empowering others, both individuals and corporations, for a better lifestyle and work-life balance. But without any further ado, hello, Shona. Nice to have you here.
Nice to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Would you like to introduce yourself? I probably did a terrible job. I'm sure you have so much more and better to say.
Not at all. No, hi. I'm Shona, and I'm kind of known in the corporate world now as the burnout angel, which I quite like that title actually. It sort of sticks and people remember it. But the reason I do what I do is because I've been there myself, and not just once, but as you said, I've hit burnout twice. And there are different levels of burnout. There's about 10 different phases, which I'll certainly demonstrate and talk about during this talk. And part of me, you mentioned that I was a sports person. I was a swimmer before that, and that was like something that I was really surprised at, that I could actually hit burnout. Because when I was swimming, I never once hit burnout. And that did make me sort of question why. And I've learned a lot about that over the last few years. I've gone on this kind of journey of self-discovery as a result.
Lovely. And where are you nowadays?
So I'm based in the UK and I work from home. I've got my own company called Mindset in Motion, and I work mainly remotely. So I have some one-to-one clients, but most of it is working with the corporate world.
Understood. Understood. Well, thank you for the quick overview. And as we all know, we're all excited and interested to actually find out more about what happened. Maybe why don't we just jump straight into your first burnout episode?
Yeah, sure. So the first time I hit burnout was 10 years ago, and it was a kind of a slow burner to get there. So in 2008, I had my first daughter, and I before then I was really passionate about my work as a lawyer. I worked long hours, and then when my daughter came along, my priorities around work changed. I didn't want to be that mum who was never going to be at the school gates. I wanted to at least have one day a week where I was dropping her off and picking her up. And unfortunately, the company I worked for at the time, they although they were happy for me to have flexible working, I still had to have the same targets as all the full timers. And that became really, really hard to be able to manage. But when I think back as well now, I think part of the reason why I hit that burnout was not just because I was working long hours. It was because I just couldn't let go. I was coming home from work quite late at night, and then I was doing all the household chores, all the cooking, the cleaning, the childcare. And I think part of that was because of how I was brought up. My parents' generation were very much of, well, it's the woman's job to do all the household things. But back when my mum was younger, she didn't have such a demanding job. She would work maybe part-time, whereas my dad took on the breadwinning job. And I think those roles are far more equal these days. But it really is hard to let go when those have been the values that have been drummed into you all your life. So I did learn. So I did unfortunately not have any healthy boundaries, and combined with a, a kind of quite a not toxic culture where I worked, but a culture that didn't really appreciate you when you had a family and you had other things as well, but also to still put in the long hours. It was really, really hard, and it ended up with me working basically harder but not smarter, not taking breaks, and just always being on and never being able to switch off. And that impacted on my sleep. It impacted my mood. I could come into work and have a document in front of me, read the same line 50 times, and I wouldn't be able to tell you what it said. And if I knew then what I know now, just stepping away for a few minutes and, reframing my brain, just going off, having a walk, coffee, a chat to someone, whatever, that would have actually helped to speed me up rather than slow me down. And I didn't do those things. And I basically stopped loving myself. I stopped caring for myself, stopped doing all the things I loved, and it broke me.
Oh, wow. So many questions popping into my head. Uh, could you maybe help us and the audience to get there into your shoes back then? How did it feel like? How long did it take? What were you going through? How did you experience it?
I mean, we've all heard of burnout these days, but it's spotting those warning signs that are important. So, for me, it was always that compulsion to prove myself, and as I said, working harder, neglecting myself. I'd find as well that I would end up being, moody and snappy at people, but didn't really know why, because that really wasn't my personality. I was always the friendly person, the bubbly one, and that kind of started to disappear. So I kind of became quite withdrawn, I guess. And these changes in my behavior started to become quite obvious. But I would say it was when the physical symptoms started. So about this would have been about 2012, and I'd been working on this quite big case for about 9 months, and we were at the point of almost settling and going to court. And our systems where I worked, the databases weren't great back then, and I had this particular client who he wouldn't accept our calls from our work numbers because it came up as like withheld or unknown on his call on his phone. So he wouldn't answer them. But he said, if you send me an email, then I'll get back to you ASAP. So that's what I did. I sent him an email, said, hi, can you give me a call? I need to discuss something with you. So there was nothing confidential attached to the email, but I'd missed out a digit in the email address. So it went to the wrong person. And about 2 hours later, I got a response from the wrong person saying, hi, I don't think you're the person, I'm the person you're looking for, but if you're blonde, 25 and sexy as you know what, then give me a call. So at first I thought that was quite funny. And then I thought, I've breached data protection. My company took that really seriously. I'd better let my manager know. And I did. And at first he said, well, thanks for letting me know. And then the next day I came into work and I was handed a letter which said I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody. I was literally frog marched out the building, suspended on full pay while a full investigation took place. I was reported to my professional body for potential gross misconduct. And that was so stressful. And that was when I had my first panic attack. And, if any of the listeners here have ever had a panic attack, you'll know how awful it is. I can honestly say I thought I was dying. I thought I was having a heart attack. And then my feet would have all these horrible stinging feelings in them, like they were in a bunch of nettles. My hands would claw in on me. And this was something I'd never experienced before. I felt really unwell. And sometimes these kind of attacks would last for just a few minutes. Sometimes they would last for hours, even into days. And I had numerous tests done. I had brain scans, I had blood tests, I had some other tests called nerve conduction tests, which was like a form of torture, believe me. And every single time the doctors would say, oh, Mrs. Hirons, we've got good news. There's nothing wrong with you. But that didn't feel like good news because I knew my body and I knew there was something wrong. But no one ever once said to me, you just need to slow down. You need to take a break. You need to change your lifestyle. And as a result, I just cracked on. and just carried on working in the same way and hadn't learnt anything. And it did get to a point where I thought I was going to lose my job because I just couldn't. My performance was being affected because of how I was. My productivity was lower. I was being threatened with performance improvement plans, and I felt like a failure. I felt like I wasn't good enough. That you know, I was only good enough to work in, like, say, a supermarket. Not that there's anything wrong with working in a supermarket, but that was where, going from being quite a senior lawyer to thinking I wasn't good enough to do anything. So I actually walked out with that job with nothing else to go to, and ended up finding a job quite local to home, which was a lot less stressful. And I was finishing work at a decent hour. I started getting that balance back in my life where I was able to spend more time with my daughter, my husband, my friends, go to the gym again. And after a couple of years, I was headhunted for another senior role as a lawyer back in the city. And I thought I was okay, and my confidence was there now. I felt a lot better about myself. But what I hadn't really worked on was working on my boundaries, my healthy boundaries. And we'll talk about this in a minute. But then the same thing happened again. It was like listening to a broken record.
Got it. And how did you overcome it? Aside, obviously, from changing the job to a local one and so on, did changing the job actually solve the situation per se? Did you change
It,
anything in your daily agenda?
yeah, it didn't. I mean, it did solve a lot of things because when I got this other job, I did start to I guess interact with people again. I couldn't even go out with friends, go to a bar without having a panic attack. And it was just almost like paralyzing me from being able to have a normal life and do anything. So over about 2 years, I did start to do that. I had some CBT, some cognitive behavioral therapy, which did help a little bit. But that kind of just got me to think in a different way. So, for example, if a friend had come to me with the same problem, how would I react to them? And so I learned those sorts of skills, which was quite helpful. But then I'd say I went from being burnt out to being bored out, which is kind of maybe a made up word, but the job wasn't challenging enough for me. And after about 6 months, I I would, whereas when I was struggling with burnout, I would get to a Friday afternoon and I'd already dread a Monday. It kind of almost got like that again in this new job because it was boring and it didn't challenge me at all. And I just thought, oh, great, I've got to go into work on Monday and I've just got to do admin and phone up chasing records or something. And it, going back to my competitive nature, that just wasn't something that really kind of made me excited to get out of bed in the morning. So I needed more. So I think I worked on a lot of things, a lot of the self care, but it wasn't enough. And this is the problem. This is where I wish at that point I'd got myself maybe a good coach, someone who'd already been through something similar and knew how to actually recover from it. And I hadn't had that.
And what about that broken record? So, do you have any parallels between the first and the second episode?
The main thing was the lack of healthy boundaries. So when I was headhunted to work back in a senior legal role for another big corporate organization, I felt comfortable because during the interview I had nothing to lose and I told them what had happened to me before, so they were aware of what had happened. Um, and they were great. They were like, "Yeah, we still want you. We think you're brilliant." And when they first offered me the job, I didn't accept it because I just didn't think I was ready to go and work back in that kind of environment. And then about 3 months later, they approached me again and they said, "Look, we'd really love you to come here." And I thought, you don't get opportunities like this knocking on your door twice. So I did, and I had flexible working. actually in that first 3 months, it was great. I won Employee of the Quarter award, and I felt really valued and recognized. And then I got promoted quite quickly. And there were only a couple of lawyers who could work on certain areas of law, and I was one of them. And my colleague who could do it as well, she left. So it was all down to me. And very, very quickly, I found myself working 60, 70-hour weeks again. One thing I was determined to keep doing in this job was to focus on my fitness and fit that into my life every day. So I would have a 12-mile journey into the office, and I would cycle to work. And then, we had showers in the office, so that was perfect. And it was a great way of me owning my morning, feeling refreshed and energized when I got into work. And the same at the end of the day as well, because I'd have to cycle back. But I was getting to the point after about 9 months of just rushing and rushing to get out the door, sort my daughter out in the mornings, rushing out. And on this one particular morning in February 2017, I don't really remember a lot about what happened, but I was about a mile away from the office. And according to a witness, my front wheel of my bike hit a wet patch on the road, and I went flying over the handlebars. And my face, I was wearing a helmet, but my face took the impact of the pavement, the road, whatever it was I landed on. And I ended up breaking all of the bones around my orbital area, completely smashed my cheekbone to pieces, broke my jaw, fractured the base of my neck, lost the sight in my left eye for over a year, and lost my hearing in my left ear for over a year. So I was placed into an induced coma for 2 weeks while the swelling went down. And then I had to have my whole face completely reconstructed. And I make a joke at this point. Normally I say I'm actually 93, but I had all this like work done on my face. And that was, to be honest, during my recovery, I did go to some pretty dark places because I had tubes coming out of my head and wires everywhere for months and months, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even walk for 10 meters without having to sit down. And going from being such a physically active person to not being able to do anything, not able to leave the house, months in hospital, in and out, more surgery for over a year. I found that really tough. And I actually went back into those thoughts of like, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure as a mum, as a wife, as a friend. And yeah, it wasn't good. But it was when my daughter, one day about 5 months into my recovery, came to me and emptied her money box out, and there was like, the equivalent. I don't know what your currency, how you work it out, but there was £1.22 in her money box. And she said, "Mummy, I would rather give you all my money for me to have my mummy and have you here." And that was my wake up call to go, do you know what? I need to get some help here. I need to change my mindset in particular, which was a huge problem, and start focusing on healthy boundaries. And that's when I decided to make a phone call and got myself a therapist, a coach, someone to mentor me and make me the person I am today.
And was it difficult to take the step to actually open up for somebody else?
um, I knew I had to. I'd never asked for help before because everyone I seem to speak to, like for example with the panic attacks, I've got an aunt who has suffered from panic attacks for many years. And I remember my mum always saying, "Oh, she ruins everything because she has one of these stupid panic attacks." And I thought, if I start telling my mum that I'm having this, I'm having these panic attacks, she won't get it. I don't want someone saying to me, "Oh, you're being stupid," because that's how I felt in my own head anyway. And I do remember on one occasion when they were really bad, going to see my local doctor, and you get a 10-minute appointment with your doctor. And it's really hard to try and explain to someone what's happening to you when you don't understand it yourself. And then he's there looking at his watch every couple of seconds, and then in the end he just said, you need to pull yourself together. And again, I felt like I felt so ridiculous because he was telling me that, and I thought I was an inconvenience, so I didn't talk about it again. Um, until that incident happened with my daughter, and I was that low that I decided, right, now's the time. Now I have got to get some help. Um, and as soon as I did start talking, the person just listened to me and didn't judge me in the slightest. So I felt it quite easy to open up to her. And then over time, I felt more relaxed and more confident and was able to open up even more.
And are you working with a specialist nowadays?
No, no, I don't work with anybody now. I would say I've got those skills myself. And this is now what I do with other people. I realize that this is definitely something that I want to do. And it was something that I had to do. I feel like this is what I was put here to do.
Got it. And before we transition to the more, yeah, up to date topics and your current devotions, have you noticed? Did you change anything? How do you compare yourself now with your version from, let's say, 10 years ago?
My mindset in particular, I would say I was one of these people. I lived in victim mode. And when bad things happened, I kept on, it was a pity party, and I would be like, oh, poor me, why do bad things happen to me all the time? Changing that mindset and accepting that, sometimes things do go wrong, but that's okay. And it's being able to not, as my sign says in the background, don't look backwards because you're not going that way. So there were lots of other things which helped as well, things like meditating, mindfulness, that sort of thing, just keeping me grounded, keeping me in the moment. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's like any habit. It can take quite a long time to learn a new habit. I think the average time is 66 days. But having someone there in your corner, kicking you up the backside when you need it, keeping you motivated, and making you realize you are good enough is what really helped me. And that's now how I help other people.
Sweet. Thank you for this. Thank you for sharing
You're welcome.
so many moments, really, especially the awakening accident. We typically speak about moment of realization. Yours seems to have been quite literal. I think before we actually started our talk right now, you mentioned nowadays you've found your why and big passion.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's funny. I read a book. I've got it here actually. Where is it? It's a really good book. And now again, I use this in my coaching. It's called The Little Book of Ikigai. I don't know if that's something you've heard of, but it's basically it's a Japanese term, and it's how to live a happy and long life. And it works on four simple processes. And it starts off with, what are you good at? And you literally just make a list of all the things that you're good at. And if I'm honest, I struggled with that at first when I first read it, because I thought, well, I'm not really good at much. So ask people who are close to you, ask people who know you, what are you good at? And then in the second column, what do I love doing? And there will be similarities, but there's going to be things that you love doing that you're not good at, and vice versa. So, like, get a highlighter pen, mark off the similarities, and then ask yourself, what does the world need more of? And that's, what does the world need more of that you're good at and that you love doing? And that list narrows down even more. And then you ask yourself, what can I get paid for? Or what can I get paid well for? And it does take a little bit of soul searching, but everything kept on coming back to being good with people, wanting to help people. And when I first started out, I wasn't quite sure what that niche was, and I was maybe trying to help everyone. And then I realized, if I'm trying to help everyone, I'm not appealing to anyone. So I needed a niche. And I thought the best thing for me to do was work with people who were just like me, but a few steps behind. And then that helps for people to resonate with me. I find it just easy just to talk to them. And, you know, right, yes, okay, I have gone away and obtained various mental health qualifications, but that's not what makes me good at what I do. What makes me good is just being able to really understand, tune into that person, hopefully give them a few tips. But the most important thing is to listen and show empathy.
Thank you. Before we jump into the more, let's say, burnout professional kind of side of things, where you have a bunch of insights to share, in the more practical terms for the average person, for me, for you, for anybody that might be listening to us right now or watching the interview, do you have any takeaways in terms of any tips, any advice that you would give, either for acknowledging awareness that something may be going wrong, or also steps for overcoming things?
Yeah. I mentioned earlier on about, the kind of phases that I went through, and I would say they gradually get worse. So, I've realized there's probably 10 phases of burnout. And some people may say there's more or less or in a different way, but I think I'll go through them in order. So the first one is that compulsion to prove yourself. So you always feel like, you've got to be at the best, you've got to work harder, etc. And then that leads on to working harder. But that doesn't always mean working smarter. It tends to be working longer and always being on. And then that leads into you neglecting your needs. So you stop doing the things that you enjoy doing. Like for me, it was not going to the gym, seeing my friends, spending time with family. And then that started to lead with this like conflict with others, but not able to find the cause. I mentioned I was this bubbly person who people always found easy to talk to, but I was becoming quite snappy and miserable, and that wasn't like me, but I couldn't change it. I didn't know why I was like that. I was also, I think, in denial as well. I wasn't really, I think, word denial and unclear, because when I said earlier on about the doctors saying there was nothing wrong with me, so it was like denial from other people as well, that, oh, you're fine, there's nothing wrong with you. Oh, okay. But I definitely became a lot more withdrawn. So withdrawal was a big thing. I stopped having interest in things. Literally, I was like a zombie half the time, just working, flat out and not having any fun. And these were very obvious behavior changes. So I think, being aware of these signs and then noticing those obvious behavior changes are quite important. I felt empty inside, just completely numb, like I had no soul. And ultimately that led to me having depression. And although it wasn't formally diagnosed, I know how I felt. I felt so low. I felt so worthless. That was definitely depression. And eventually it led to me having a complete breakdown, which happened in 2013. And I'd taken a weekend away to spend some time with my husband and my sister-in-law. And I'd actually, for the first time in probably 2 years, had a decent night out. The next morning I woke up and I just lost all the feeling in my feet, in my hands. My whole left side collapsed on me. I soiled myself, which is like so degrading. I just had no control over my entire body, and I was blue lighted into hospital. All these tests again, only to be told again, there's nothing wrong with you. And now I know that if anyone gets to that stage, and I hope no one gets to even stage 5, it's knowing when to get some help, knowing to step back, just take those breaks. So those are the important ones. But you also asked me, what are my takeaways? What are my tips for, for helping you deal with this? And I think the having those boundaries was really important. Being able to, I find that for me personally, and we're all different, you have to have a set of good coping strategies that can help you. Mine has always been to do some form of exercise. But other people will maybe find something else. Like my husband, for example, his way of decompressing, I think that's the good word to use, is how do you decompress? His is to go into the garage and take his car apart and put it back together again. That would be my idea of hell. But ultimately, I think owning your morning is really important. A lot of people now work in either remotely or in hybrid roles. We tend to be at home more. I know it's not for everyone, but I've now replaced my normal cycling to work with what I call a fake commute. So before I start work every day, I get out of bed, I come downstairs, I have a glass of water, and I take my dog for a walk. And we're out for sometimes 45 minutes. And that's my fake commute. And it gets me into that mindset of leaving the house to come back to the office. And I do the same at the end of the day as well. And that's really helpful. And there's been some scientific evidence on this. There's a lady called Linda Geddes, and she speaks a lot about the importance of having natural light in your workspace and getting out for a walk in the day, and the earlier the better. And just a 20 to 30-minute walk in the morning can help wake up your body, raise your energy, and also help you to be more creative. And I've definitely found that has made me more productive and full of energy, and a great way to start my day. The second one is to cut down on your to-do list. So, if you're constantly having a to-do list as long as your shopping list, you're more likely to end up running around with your hair on fire, which then has a negative effect on your mood, on your performance, and it can also impact your sleep. So I like to call my to-do list an achievement list, and focus on the tasks that absolutely must be done, what can be delegated, and what can wait. And going back to earlier on about letting go of some of the things, this goes back to delegation. You don't have to do it all yourself. And that is really important. Ask yourself, even if you've got kids, what can they do to help? Could they pop the vacuum around or do the dusting for you? Do you have to do everything? And the answer is normally no, it's not. So my top tips include 5 must-do work-related tasks and 5 must-do tasks for yourself, and schedule them into your calendar so they pop up. And then you can add more in if you like, if you achieve the first lot. And when you call it an achievement list, you're more likely to appreciate the work that you've completed. And then my final tip, I guess, is to take your breaks. I bang on about this all the time, and it might sound like I'm nagging about it. But again, there's this scientific evidence provided by Microsoft that proves that taking just short breaks between meetings can have a huge benefit to how you focus, how productive you are, and how that affects your mood. And lots of people say to me, but I don't have time to take a break because I'm so busy. But actually, not taking your breaks will slow you down. So if you're going to change one thing about the way that you work this year, slow down in order to speed up. And it's how you take those breaks as well. So make sure they're away from the work you're doing. Don't just sit at your computer and then go onto an online shopping channel or social media. Do something that's fun, maybe even get your heart rate up. So I've got a nice simple tip. When you're boiling your kettle for your tea or coffee break, set your timer either on your phone or on your watch for 3 minutes, and you can actually do a total body workout in that 3 minutes.
Really?
You can do. So I'm actually trained as a personal trainer as well. This is how I know this. You can do 12 wall presses. You could do 12 squats, and then you can do 12 crunches, and keep repeating that process for the whole 3 minutes. And believe me, by the time you get to the end of that 3 minutes, you've got a cup of tea or coffee waiting for you, and you will feel so much more energized, and you'll be able to go back to your work. Your heart rate goes up. Maybe pop one of your favorite songs on in the background as well, which is also helpful. And then maybe in another break later on, you could do another routine, but mix it up. So you could do maybe 12 lunges, 12. What else could you do? If you've got weights, you can use weights or resistance bands. You can pull them down behind your head. And if you want to really do these, do 12 burpees and keep repeating. And it's just something now that I've ingrained into my lifestyle, and it works. And I think as well, having those boundaries. So I will not work before 8 a.m. and I will not work after 8 p.m. And I take those breaks throughout the day, and it's made every bit of difference in my life.
Got it, Shona. So much useful advice here. Since we have covered a bunch of different topics and areas, I know you have even so much more to offer. But as a maybe last one, or slowly going towards the end of our talk, just a very open one. Well, is there anything else that you have on your heart? Would it be to the things that you're nowadays doing in terms of corporate well-being, developing resilience, or maybe safe spaces, or maybe the remote work aspect? Just feel invited to give us one last spice from Shona that's really strong on your heart right now and on your mind too.
I mean, I've just had the best year in my career ever. I wrote an article about a year and a half ago, which I published on LinkedIn, sharing kind of my story that we've talked about today, but then the coping strategies, the way to break out of that victim mode. And I was approached by quite a large corporate global company to come and talk to their staff in several different time zones on Zoom, and that was fine. And then their staff really resonated with what I was saying. So they invited me to be their resilience and burnout coach for the whole of their company in 55 different countries, plus all, I think it was all 50 states of America. Um, and I learned so much about all the different cultures, the different types of people I spoke to. I even got to travel out to Denver to meet everyone in October, and it was fantastic. And now my contract was for a year, and it came to an end at the end of December. And it's kind of left this big hole here in my heart, because I made some amazing connections with people, and I'll forever be in touch with a lot of them. But it's like that's given me that hunger to want to do more of that, because you know being told that I've changed people's lives and mindsets just by talking to them and giving them a few of these simple tips that we've talked about on here today, it's just cemented that fact that this is what I love doing, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I love Mondays now. I wake up on a Monday and I'm genuinely excited about who I'm going to speak to that day. And it's a great feeling, and it might have taken me until my late 40s to get here, but now I don't want to go anywhere.
Lovely. And quite an empowering closing remark as well.
Thank you.
So, Shona, thank you for being here with us, for sharing openly your story and all the different turns and twists around it. It has been a pleasure. I really wish you that the current year is even better than the last one. And I believe that everybody meets others for a certain reason. And even if we don't know the reason, or we didn't know it until maybe half an hour ago or 1 hour ago, it's a blessing knowing you, and we'd be very fond and very happy to keep on contributing to each other's work. For all of us are actually sharing the one and the same ultimate goal, namely
Yeah,
people empowerment.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll leave the listeners with one sort of word of wisdom, or phrase of wisdom, and that is, start believing in yourself, because once you do start believing in yourself, amazing things do start to happen.
Lovely. Well, nothing more to add on my end. Shona, thank you so much once again for your time, and wishing you an amazing year. Hope to encounter each other across the journey quite soon again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.